So I'm Ivan Herndon. Today I'm going to be talking to you about deploying to the cloud without all the baggage. And essentially what that means is how do you deploy to the cloud from more of a front end standpoint and having to deal with like the least amount of configuration as possible. If you are interested in finding me on social media, I'm at Ivan Bytes on Twitter, Emblem Dev Academy on Instagram. And if you want to hear about, what I think about being Black in tech, you can check out the Black Excellence in Tech podcast, and you can download that or listen pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. So when we're thinking about deploying to the cloud without baggage from a front end perspective, really what we're talking about is how can we deploy UIs to the front end. And when we think about that, one of the newer movements is what's considered the Jamstack. So what is a Jamstack? Jamstack stands for the JavaScript APIs and markup stack. So essentially, JavaScript, as I'm sure most of you know, is what gives dynamic functionality to your website. And when you're working with or deploying with the Jamstack, you can use whatever framework you choose, whether it's React or Angular or Svelte or, just vanilla JavaScript. For APIs, any server-side functionality is accessed through HTTP services. So this could be third-party APIs. This could be your own serverless functions or full dedicated server hosted elsewhere. And essentially, the front end and the server layer are completely decoupled here. And then markup, what is that? Essentially, you want to serve your site as static HTML. And, why would you care about this? Well, for one reason, the ability to serve pre-built markup and assets over a CDN leads to faster performance. And one of the best practices when you're dealing with the Jamstack, and which we'll do actually in just a little bit, is to serve your site over a CDN. Jamstack can remove multiple moving parts and systems from hosting infrastructure, so you don't have to worry about the database or server vulnerabilities, again, because we're decoupling the front end from the server side. Hosting static files is less expensive and at times even free. So for all of those who will follow along today, you'll be able to deploy the site completely free. I've seen and used free services that have allowed me to deploy multiple sites with quite a bit of traffic for free. So it can be really cost effective. Everything can be cached in the CDN. So deployments can be simpler, built-in redundancy, great load capacity. So scale ends up being not a problem at all. And one of the big things is front-end developers can focus on the front end and not a monolithic architecture, leading a better developer experience. Now, how exactly does this work? So what we're going to do today, let me hide this. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a version control repo. So everybody should have the link to the repo, and we'll go through the instructions there. When you have a version control repo, the system we're going to use or the host we're going to use, Netlify, when you merge into your production branch, it kicks off a build automatically. So you have built-in CI/CD, and then it deploys to a CDN that's going to host the static front end. And any HTTP requests you make or any communication with your APIs would be through HTTP requests. So we're going to get started with the demo. So again, if you have the repo up, that would be good if you want to follow along. I'll start here by getting us started. So the first thing that you'll want to do is, come to the repo and you'll want to fork this repo. Now it's important that you fork this to get the full demo where you deploy the site yourself. This will make it easier to deploy with Netlify using a Git website. Now, if you also want to run the app locally, which I'll do here in just a bit, just so that we can make sure what we see locally ends up being the same thing that we see when we deploy. I would say after you fork the repo, you should clone it from your own organization. And I think most people know how to clone repos, but just to make sure I don't want to leave anything out, what you'll want to do is copy this link here and then use the git clone command inside of the terminal. So that would just be git clone and then what you copied. Now, I already have the repo obviously on my machine, so I don't need to clone it. But after you do that, you'll want to navigate into your repo using a terminal and then open it up in your code editor of choice. I also use VS Code. That's my preferred editor, but it could be whichever one that you choose. Now, after that, what you'll want to do is do an npm install or a yarn install. Now, this is assuming that you have Node installed. So if you don't have Node installed, that'll be the first step before you can do an npm install. And you should be able to find Node installation instructions in the repo. And you can find it just by Googling like install Node, and you'll find the package for either, Windows or Mac or Linux. All right. So we've already got a project that is pretty simple, but will allow me to show you guys all the different steps in this deployment process. So let's just go through and look at a couple of things first so I can explain how the project is set up. We'll run it locally, and then from there, we're going to connect to Netlify and get it deployed. Let's see. Somebody asked a question, is the first step is to clone using git clone? Yeah, the first step I would say would be to fork the repo, because you want to have it under your own organization for later when we deploy to Netlify. And then you'll want to git clone from there. All right. So this is a React project. It's built using the Next.js framework. And just very quickly, this is built using the same styles that comes with the that comes when you first create a new app. The reason I like using Next.js is the structure is pretty simple. Every page that you add under this pages directory creates a new route. So you don't have to worry about any routing or anything like that. You can, of course, add components that are reusable. But one really great thing that Next.js has is that it allows you to tell it what data do you need before the page loads. And there's two functions that you can use to set that up. One being get server-side props, and the other one being get static props. And what this allows us to do is make our API call so we can have all the data before the page initially renders. So the API that we're using here is Contentful. I just set up some data in Contentful that we can use, and everything is already set up here for you. Now, the only thing that you'll have to do to run this locally is you're going to want to create a file called a .env.local file. That's going to be in the root of the project. And then the environment variables and their values are in the repo. So you can just copy that directly here. And is this big enough for everybody? Yeah, I'll just make it bigger just in case. All right. So now that we got that all set up, we can go ahead and run this and see what we get. So to run this in dev mode, you'll want to either use yarn dev if you're using yarn, or if you're just using npm, you can do npm run dev. This is going to start the project up in the local server, and we'll be able to see what we get. All right. So check this out here. Go to localhost 3000. All right. So hopefully you guys aren't tired of seeing my face just yet. But I just created a couple entries in Contentful. So the title, the date, the photo, really everything that you see on this page is coming from Contentful's API. So when we go and deploy the Netlify, we'll be able to make sure that we're connecting to the API like we're supposed to. And then we'll also be able to double check and make sure that the updates we make via the API are reflected in our deployment. All right. Okay, so now that we got that all set up, let's go ahead and create a Netlify account. Now, I already got a Netlify account, so I won't have to go through the sign up steps, but it's pretty simple. You can sign up, create an account with your email, or you can sign up and do like a single sign on. So mine is connected to my GitHub account so that when I sign in, it automatically signs me up with GitHub. Oh, well, it used to. Let's see. There we go. It's connected to my GitHub and Bitbucket account. So I'll give you guys just a little bit of time to go ahead and create an account because I think you do have to confirm your email. But I'll explain kind of some of the things that you see here. So this is my Netlify account with all the different sites that I have deployed here. And for a lot of time, I had all of these on here for free, but I started I needed more build minutes essentially, and I needed to be able to run builds concurrently. So I just upgraded to a pro plan, but it's only like $20 a month. But I think for a lot of what you can do, the free plan is perfectly fine, and definitely for our demo today. So what we want to do here is we're going to add a new site from Git. So the first thing you'll want to do is in your on your home screen, once you sign into the app, in this team overview section, you should see a new site from Git button. So we're going to click that, and we're going to connect to GitHub, right? In this case, it should be GitHub for everybody because we're, because you're forking my repository from GitHub, right? Let me see. It looks like there's a question. What to select for the type of project to build? What are your options there? Let's see. You should be able to click the new site from Git. Are you seeing other options? Okay, yeah. Just let me know what the options are, and I can try and walk you through it. Oh, that stuff, just it doesn't matter. Yeah, so it'll ask you what type of project you're building, e-commerce, web application. You could pick web application. This particular one doesn't have that. So if you click on GitHub for continuous deployment, it should ask you to sign into your GitHub account. And again, mine is connected already, so it might just take a little bit more time for you to sign in. But essentially what it does is you're allowing Netlify to connect to your GitHub account and to view your repos. Now you can select the default, which I think is all repositories, or you can pick the one that you forked specifically if you don't want it to have access to all your repositories. But I don't see a problem with just giving it that access that it needs. So once you find the next Netlify demo, what you'll want to do there is click on that project, and you'll notice a few things here. You'll see it'll have an owner, which will be should be your name and the word team, essentially for creating this Netlify account just now. You'll also see that it's asking you what branch do you want to deploy. So for this particular project, there's only one branch. It is the main branch. Now you could use any branch in your repository as your production branch. And actually later we can look at the deployment details where you can deploy multiple branches if you have it. But essentially here for this first time deploy, you'll want to pick whatever your production branch is going to be. Yeah, so just to answer the question in the chat real quick, so the next Netlify project should be in the GitHub already, right? Because you would have forked it from the GitHub link that I had, the GitHub link for this talk. If you fork it, then you'll have all of the code there and it'll be under your project. All right. Now, because we're using Next.js specifically, what we want to do here is we want to update our build command, and we also want to update the publish directory. Now, Next.js, it makes things really easy, so you can just start development, hit the ground running. It is a little bit different here, so it's just a couple changes that we have to make sure that it deploys correctly, but they're really minor. And again, we're almost done with the deployment section here. So you'll see that there's really very little configuration that you have to do. So we just want to make sure that we build our project using Next build. We also want to go ahead and delete the publish directory. So with Next build and then a plugin that we'll add in just a little bit, it'll know what directory to create and what directory to deploy from. So we don't have to worry about that. But we do want to take a look at our advanced options. Now, in this case, when you start a new site from Git, it gives you the advanced options where you can add your environment variables. So if you remember earlier when we were looking at the local deployment, we had two environment variables that we'll need in order for the API to work. So what we're going to want to do is copy those over. So again, if you are following along, you can take a look at the repo and the README. Look at the environment variables that you're supposed to put in the .m file, and we can put those here. So I am just going to copy that stuff over from the other screen, because if I didn't, I'm sure I would make a typo. And I'm going to add the second one here. Now, one note here about environment variables, because I am sharing them all with everybody. In particular, these contentful ones are essentially just delivery tokens. So it just gives you read access. It doesn't give you write access. So, just a note, normally very bad practice to have your have like access tokens in your repo, but because of the demo, like we needed it. And then definitely the reason why the project is set up the way that it is, where we read from environment variables, is so that you don't have any of these access tokens or even like the space ID hard coded in your project, right? So that's why we want to set it up this way. All right. So now, I mean, we're essentially done with what we need to deploy this app. So I just want to double check everything. We've got our build command as next build. We deleted what was there for the publish directory. We added our environment variables, and yeah, we can hit deploy site and see what we get. So now, one thing that Netlify will do, it will automatically deploy the site and build it, right? That's the whole point of us using it. but it's going to also just give you a URL that you can use to view your site. It just randomly generates like some names for you for the URL. So what we're going to have to do is, or what we're going to want to do is change our site project name. So while this is deploying, I'll just go ahead and do that. So all I'm doing here is I'm just changing the site name so that we can get a URL that's a little bit more friendly. And yeah, I'll just change it to Hacking with the Homies, I guess. All right. All right. And now you'll notice here that this URL that it says our app is located at is hackingwiththehomies.netlify.app. So let's take a look there and see what we get. All right. This is good actually. It looks really bad, but I knew this was going to happen. So if you remember, I said earlier, because it's a Next.js project and just because they have a specialty in how they build, we have to add a plugin just to get things going the right way. You can't add the plugin before you deploy the site the first time. So that first deploy is going to go bad, but we can quickly fix it. So what we're going to do is navigate back to the Netlify UI here. We're going to click on plugins. We're going to go to the plugins directory. And this is just going to be a list of build plugins that we can use. And I'm going to type next. And we want to use the next on Netlify plugin. Now, this plugin is essential, right? You need to have it for the Next.js project to build correctly on Netlify. I mean, of course, you can write your own, but there's one already here that works. So we'll use that. So if you click install, it gives you a list of all your sites. It's going to show your ones that you most recently worked with at the top. So we have Hacking with the Homies right here. So I'm going to just go ahead and install that. And then we are going to have to re-trigger that deployment after we add the plugin. So what I'm going to do is just start our deployment off, and then we can take a look at the deployment as it builds. So this essentially should just take a couple minutes to go through, build our project, and deploy it. You'll see it goes through all the steps. So it'll download npm. In this case, it's using Yarn. It'll install all of your packages, and then it starts to build. And then we'll see a couple different like build steps here because it's going to use a plugin. But I mean, if you think about it, I didn't have to write any like YAML files or anything for configuration. I was able to accomplish everything we've done so far through the UI. If you want to get more advanced, you definitely can. So there's a build file called the netlify .toml file that you could use if you have more advanced things that you need to do or check for during your build process. But for your most simple builds, and really for a majority of them, you probably don't need to use that. You can get through everything in the UI. And yeah, I guess even before I was done, it went through and built everything. So you can always check your logs here in case a build failed or if you were checking for anything specifically during the build process. But this is a step here where it builds out the Next.js project. It runs through the plugin, so it clearly tells you that. Sets up any function handling, and then it tells you here that it is deploying the site. And you find out here that it was definitely done. So let's see if it worked this time. We can just go here and refresh, and then we should see, right, that this page looks exactly how it did locally, which is obviously the result that we wanted. Now, again, we are using the Contentful API here. So I have a space that I created specifically for this demo. And just to show you with the server side or the get server side props, that allows you to talk to the API. And anytime that the page renders or is rendered from the server, that's when that data comes in. So one thing I'll do here real quick is we can just update this listing in Contentful. And I'll just change the name since that's the first thing that we see here. Publish those changes. And this should just take a few seconds to update. And yeah, you'll see here that it updated the name right here. So just a couple things, because I know I went over that part pretty quickly. So Contentful is what's considered a headless CMS. So essentially, it allows you to really store all the data that you might have for a blog site, possibly even an e-commerce store, or with a lot of companies and marketing departments, a way that they use it is for landing pages and things like that. It allows you to have that without it being tied to the front end. Remember, again, like Jamstack, the whole thing is the UI is separate from the server and the database. So you have those two things separate. So you can think of, the way that WordPress works. You input all the data, you have the UI, but it's all tied together. It all builds together. In this case, we have the UI that could be custom designed and updated without worried about being tied to themes or worried about being tied to the data directly. And we can just import the data and use it. Yeah. Let's see. I got a question here. What is the challenging part? What I think it's probably supposed to be what's the most challenging part in the build process? I would say in this case, because specifically we're using a Next.js app, I think that's the most challenging part in the process is just knowing what you have to use in order to get it up and running the right way, which is that Next.js plugin. Now, I know we focused a lot on talking about the front end because we are using a React Next.js app, but you can also on Netlify also deploy serverless functions as well. So you don't only have to use Netlify for front end. You could also do serverless functions, and they also have long running background functions. Another thing to note is that even though we're using Netlify here today, this isn't the only host that has like very simple to no configuration and works well with the Jamstack. There are tons. Another one being Vercel. I think it's at vercel.com is another host that you might be interested in checking out or testing if you're, want to test deploying some UIs and see how that works. So let's take a look back at our code locally. So we can make a change in our actual code, and then we'll see that kicks off a new build, right? So far we deployed the site from our main branch, but that doesn't necessarily prove that we have continuous delivery yet. So let's just finish up there. All right. So let's just make a change, and I'll make a very simple change, like we'll change the color of the title. Let's see. Change the color of the title, and all right. So this is locally. This isn't live in project, but this is local. So all I have to do is, because I have it set up to build off of our main branch, is just make a commit here. I'm just gonna add this to a commit message. And then I'm just gonna push it up. And then we'll want to check the deployments here to make sure that it kicks in the way it's supposed to. And let's see, I might have to refresh. All right. Yeah, so we can see here that that pipeline got kicked off. It's building. Not only does it build, it shows a commit message for what triggered that build. And we can wait while it builds here. Other interesting ways that you can kick off builds is like via a webhook. So if we had content in our CMS, so in Contentful here, and we only wanted to build statically every time we change the content, we could create a webhook that would force a build when the content updated as well. And you can also build from a CLI. So there is a CLI that works, Netlify CLI, where you can build directly from there. But I find it easiest to just set this up in the UI the first time around and to use the automated deploys via Git. All right. So now we're published. And if we go here and we update, we'll see now that we have the latest version of our app here. So, yeah, so we were able to, again, use the version control repo, right? So that was the repository that you all forked that I had. And if you didn't do it just yet, if you follow the instructions, you'll be able to. We were able to deploy directly from the production branch. So again, that was the main branch that we had set up initially. And then I pushed directly to that branch to kick off another deploy. But of course, if you merge a pull request into that branch as well, that would kick off the deploy just as well. We can see that you get hosting right out of the box with Netlify. They give you a URL that you can view your site at. And we're making our API requests using HTTP services, right? In this case, we're using a Contentful API, which is where we're getting that data that we saw. So a couple other things I just wanted to note about Netlify. One of them being that you get this project URL. It comes with SSL off rip. Wanted to add a custom domain. This comes with SSL, so you don't have to pay additional or set up the certificates yourself. You can just do it all here and use their domain servers. And I found that the easiest way to, build sites for people. So I do like quite a bit of, I guess you can call it like freelance work and projects, and Netlify has always been my go-to for that. And it could be anywhere from regular static websites to full-fledged applications. You could do it all here. And you could even deploy, again, like your serverless functions if you're doing your backend serverless as well. And if we take a look at our deploy settings, the one last thing I wanted to show you guys is, in our build and deploy. So this here tells us, these are the initial settings that we set up, like our build command, publish directory. You can make your logs visible to the public if you want. And it tells what repo you're connected to. The deploy context, this is essentially what branch will it deploy from. So your production branch is the one that we set up when we first connected. And you can set it up to deploy any pull requests against this production branch, right? If you want to do branch deploys, you can deploy every single branch that's in your repo, or you could also just add individual branches. Now, I've done this both ways. I find it can be specifically useful if you're using like a Git flow pattern where you might have a develop branch that you merge into master or into they're calling it the main branch now. But if you have it deploy that branch specifically, you can always view what's in develop at any given time, and you'll have a static URL that always works for that particular branch. And then I've seen it where you can deploy all your branches. So if you're working in a workflow where you have feature branches, um, every single feature branch could get deployed and you could test that feature out right there in its own environment. So it's been, it's been really useful being able to have access to both of those features. Yeah. Um, so again, yeah, just taking it for, full cycle all the way around. We had our front end project. We were able to get it into the build system, completely built, connected to the API, and hosted on the CDN. Essentially in about 30 minutes or less. So we made great time. Um, I just wanted to say, thanks for taking the time out today. Again, if you want to reach me on social media, here are my handles. And yeah, curious if anybody has any questions.